All right. So the past last week we already discussed how to also in your Scratch, right? How to create a variable like this one, a variable that will hold whatever your user is inputting on their name, right? It will be stored here in the variable called name, and then how to display that input from the user through the variable is through using through using the print command, right? And then by just uh,
Dylan,
displaying them.
so what have you done?
Freya, you're not muted.
Priya, can you mute your and turn on your
Oh,
camera, please?
sorry. I thought I turned on my camera and and like I thought I turned on my camera instead of unmuting myself.
Okay, that's good. All right. So past week we discussed about variables, right? And it is used for storing data that's going to be processed and used by your Python later on, right? And then also we learn about inputting numbers and then try to declare them using the data type like float and int, right? Float is dealing with decimal numbers and int is for whole number. Then we can also use a different operators on your Python, like the plus, that's for addition. Okay, it's hanging. Plus for addition, minus, dash for minus, that's dash for minus. Then asterisk for multiplication and slash for division, right? So these are the four operators that we're using in Python and also in your Scratch, right? Then we let Python to process all those operators, right? Okay, and the same thing with the Scratch that we have programmed. So at least we have now knowledge on what is a variable, what is a data type, how to set up the data types of your numbers as an integer or float. Float is a decimal number, integer is a whole number, and how to display them. So at least we know already the basics of some of the basics in our Python and also in our Scratch, right? Okay, so now let's continue with the book here. It's choose the topic. This chapter is about choose a language. Now, what is a programming language? Programming language is the one that you use to create a code or a program, right? The one that we already learned is the programs or the programming language called your Scratch and Python. All right. Scratch and Python are programming languages. So there are a lot of programming languages in the that is being used by the programmers. There's a lot actually. So, but what we are focusing at now for you guys is Scratch and Python. So there are some like your Java, your C++, your Visual Basic, your JavaScript. So there's a lot of programming language. So when you try to program here in these different programming languages, they have different ways of writing the codes, but the idea or the concept is the same all throughout the programming languages. If you know the basics of programming, it will you will not have a hard time learning different programming languages. So that's why it's very important for you guys to learn about the basics of programming. That's what we are doing here in this one. These are one of the basics in programming languages. If you know the basic, it's very, very easy to learn different languages. All right. So compare programming languages. So before we can choose the best program language to use, we need to compare the languages first. Think about the good points and bad points of each language. So far we learned about Scratch and Python. So here are some features of Scratch and Python, all right? Now here in your table, I would ask you to create a Word document, create this table, put the 3 columns there like features of Scratch only, features of Python only, and features of both language. Alright, now open Microsoft Office Word in your computer. Open Word in your computer, and then let's try to do this activity together. Alright, there are at least a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 features here that we need to put or arrange them here in our table. Is it features of Scratch only, or is it features of Python only, features of both language? Alright, we know that Scratch is a block language, block programming, right? We use blocks of commands, put them together, and then it process and give you an output, right? So to do this, in your Word, insert a table. Okay, click insert tab, table 3 columns and I think 6, like that. Let's try to, that's color purple. Let's try to color this one purple. Home tab, fill, where's fill? Or blue? I think this one. Okay. Then I need to lay out the height maybe around 125. Okay. Then that would be features of Scratch only here. Create this in your Word. Features of both languages. Alright. Select them. Make them text white, center, bold. Okay. You done? Alright, pay attention here first. Before you create this, I will give you time to create this. Let's do this one first. I'll give you example. Alright. Programs that take up a lot of space on the screen. Jason, is it Scratch? Is it Python? Or is it both?
Both.
Huh?
Both.
No. Only Scratch will take up a lot of screen space on the screen, right? Because it's using blocks to create it, and then there's this preview and everything, right? When you use Python, Python always only uses a text. It's a text-based programming, so it doesn't contain any blocks or anything, right? So it is not using a lot. Oops. It is not using a lot of space. Okay. So this time, you need to put this one here, a programs take up a lot of space on the screen. So you need to type it here. Program takes up a lot of space on the screen. That's your Python, right? All right. Next, B. Christabel, you can enter a lot of program commands in a small space. Letter B. Is it Python, Scratch, or both?
Both.
You can enter a lot of program commands in a small space. It's dealing with the space.
Python.
It's Python. Because Python doesn't take up a lot of screen, only this part, right? So there's still a lot of blanks here. While you compare it to Scratch, so Scratch will take up a lot of space because it uses blocks, it has previews and everything, right? So this one goes to, you can enter a lot of program commands in a small space. In Python, you can enter a lot of programs command in a small space. On a small space. Okay. Next, letter C. Programs are made by combining visual elements. What is it? Antonio.
Features of Scratch only.
Scratch only. Okay, so it is Scratch only because it is visual elements. It means that you can see there's sprites, right? Or images that you can see there. So this is Scratch only. Programs are made by combining visual elements. So you put it there. Okay. Next, letter D. It is easy to make a lively user interface with colorful images. Jennifer Lee, is it Scratch only, is it Python only, or both?
Both.
Read again, letter D.
Python.
Okay, you're not getting it. Wait, let me. All right, you can see that this is the Jennifer. You can see that this is Python, right? Right? When you run Python, when you run it, wait, it's when you run it, you can only see this one, right? Okay. Now, when you try to use Scratch, oops. Sorry, it's loading. Now, when you try to use Scratch, Scratch has a lot of images, sprites, and everything, right? Blocks, colorful things. Now, that's the interface for your Scratch, and this is the interface for your Python. All you can see is codes or text. Now, the question here, letter D. It is easy to make a lively user interface with colorful images. Is it Scratch only, Python only, or both?
Scratch only.
So Scratch only. So in this this chapter actually is just trying to make you guys differentiate between the two programming languages, between Scratch and Python, right? This one is it is easy to make a lively user interface with colorful images. It is easier to make a lively user interface with colorful images. All right. Now, you just continue this one later, all right? Put everything into the proper features, okay? So here, elements, programs have variables. Rafael, is it Scratch, Python, or both?
Both.
Both. Because also your Scratch deals with variables, right? Your Python also wants variables. Like, for example, here, they also have variables. Your Scratch, this is where we create the Scratch variable earlier, right? And also your Python also deals with variables. This one, number one, number two, and result, and also your name are variables, right? Okay. The next is programs have arithmetic operators. Jorel, is it Scratch, Python, or both?
Uh, wait.
You know what's arithmetic operators? The plus,
Oh.
minus, as multiplication and division.
I think both.
Both. Okay. Programs have input and output. Is it Scratch, Python, or both? Quincy.
Both?
Both. Both have inputs and outputs, right? The program elements are blocks. Evelyn, is it Scratch, Python, or both?
Scratch.
Scratch. Letter I, the program elements are text only. Melvera, is it Scratch, Python, or both?
Both.
Again, the program elements are text only. Letter I. Scratch, Python, or both? Melvera.
Yes.
Huh? Melvera, what's the answer? Where is she? Alright, can you help her? Jeremiah, where's your camera? Alright, JJ. The program elements are text only. Is it Python, Scratch, or both?
Element, right?
Huh?
Yeah, element is Python.
Alright, if only text, it's only Python. If there are errors, the programs will not work or they will do the wrong thing.
They will not work.
Yeah, which one? Scratch, Python, or
Python.
huh?
Python.
It's both. Both of
Yeah,
them will
but
work.
Scratch is like you can do free stuff yourself like that.
Yeah, but it won't run, right? If there's errors, both of them will
Yeah,
not
of
run
course.
if
Yeah,
there's
of course.
errors. So they're both. All right, Matthew, letter K. You must convert user input to a numerical data type before you do a calculation. Is it Python, Scratch, or both?
Is it both?
No, it is Python. All right. Why? It says here you must convert user input to a numerical data type before you do the calculation. That's what we did here in our Python, right? We ask our user to input two numbers, but before they can do the calculation, we need to convert them into numbers like float and integer, right? Float is an integer, is a decimal number, and integer is a whole number before they can give us a proper or correct calculation, right? But in our sprite, in our here, we don't need to convert our input into numbers. We don't do that here in Scratch. But here in Python, we need to let the Python know that the variable number one is holding a number float, which the data type is float, which contains decimal numbers. So it happens only in our Python. It says there, convert a string or number to a floating point number if possible. Okay. And the last one is there is no need to convert user input to a numerical data type before you do a calculation. So the opposite of that, it's Scratch. All right, later on, after I discuss, you guys need to fill this one up with all of those features here for your Scratch, Python, or both. All right, fill your table here in your Microsoft Office Word. All right, let's continue. Why we choose Scratch? It is easier to understand it. It's like visually, we don't need to memorize codes, right? We don't need to analyze the code. Yeah, we still need to analyze something on how the program would work, but we don't worry about our typos or the program missing some characters in there in doing programs in Python, right? So Scratch is like a visual or block programming language. So Scratch shares important features with other programming languages, such as they also have variables, they also have operators, they also have input and outputs, they also have structures such as loops. Later on, we're gonna learn about loops, like your for loops and while loop, and then we also learn about different kinds of conditional programming, like if, right, else if. Okay, so there's a lot. So Scratch also has special features which make it suitable for learners. For example, it is easy to make working program by fitting blocks together. You don't need to type the commands, so you make fewer errors. Your programs have a lively user interface, and then there is no need to convert between data types. So the features make Scratch very good for young learners. Using Scratch helps students develop their programming skills. May I ask, during your primary days, did you encounter Scratch already? Kaylin, turn on your camera, please.
Yeah. Wait.
Kaylin, Kaylin,
Yeah.
turn on your camera. Where are you?
It is on. Wait. Wait, it is on.
My question is, have you used Scratch before during your primary?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So why do we choose Python also? Can you read, Kaylin?
When students become more confident at programming, they often move to text-based languages such as Python. Python does not have a lively block-based interface like Scratch, but Python has some important advantages that Scratch does not have. For example, text commands take up much less space on the screen than block commands. Python has many more operators and other processing features. It is easier to write long, complex programs in Python than in Scratch. For these reasons, professional programmers use Python much more than Scratch to make programs that are used in real life.
Okay. So since in my own opinion, when I try to use Scratch, it's like for kids, right? But it develops programming skills in kids. So when I maybe when you guys progress in programming or get mature, yeah, it's more like using Python already changed to a text-based language, right? Okay, but both of them is a very good programming language. Okay, next. All right. What are the apps made using Python? So these are the apps that's being made in creating this Python. You might think that why are we learning this Python? It's not very important. Oh, you're mistaken on that. All the things that you're holding now on your phone and everything that you see in the digital world is made up of Python programs. Okay? So professional programmers often use a mixture of different languages to make their programs. So it's okay to do that, to mix everything, different languages. All right. So these well-known apps were partly made using Python and partly using other languages. So your YouTube, your Dropbox, your Google, your Netflix. All right. Version of this well-known computer games also were made using Python, like your Sims, Civilization, Toontown Online, and a lot of more. Right? Python is one of the top 5 programming languages used in the world today. Okay? So easy to learn and use. You have to pay to use some programming languages, but Scratch and Python are free. So that's why we are using that. Okay. This type of program or Scratch here is the one that we did before, right? To ask our user to input two numbers and then we will try to calculate them, like your addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. We did this one already. Do you still remember? All right. Okay. For your activity today, try to finish this one, the table. All right. Putting them, all the features here, put them in a correct feature. Is it only for Scratch, Python, or both? All right. Finish it first. This one here. I put some of it already in there. Try to fill them up. You get it? You will submit that at the end of this period.